Now I can record. Okay.
Got it.
A little technical stuff.
No worries.
Well, thank you so much. I like to record these just because then I can pay a little more attention to talking and not having to make sure I get everything down typed while we're talking. So thank you for taking the time to chat today.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this story, and I have a couple of questions for you. My daughter did equine therapy at Dreams on Horseback. And so it's so funny when at first I thought this story was on hypnotherapy. And then I was like, no, it's not hypnotherapy, it's hippotherapy, and it's PT on horses. But I went on Dreams. We haven't been there in a while. She did over the summer, like 2 or 3 years ago. And we also have a horse, but there's a horse on one of the, in like a video and on the website that looks like our pony Bess. And I was going to ask you if by chance, if you know if there's a Bess at Dreams on Horseback.
There isn't right now to my knowledge, but there may have been at some point.
Okay. I was like going to call because Bess was our first little pony. She's a little halflinger. And I know there's so many of them for this purpose because they're so good. And we sold Bess to Camp Kern.
Okay.
And heard through the grapevine that she was being used. Well, she was a barn favorite. She was requested all the time, but that she was being used for riders with cerebral palsy.
Okay.
And so when I saw that picture, I was like, oh, maybe she's got a reputation now and Dreams on Horseback has her. But
yeah, the 2 halflingers they have right now are named Abby and Lad. Okay. But, people change horses' names too. So
they do. And horses move around a lot. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like we've had to learn that as we own our second horse. And I think he's probably going to be a lifer. But, as you change as a rider and grow or whatever, you kind of, horses make the rounds, and it's hard for my daughter, like she will never want to live without her horse currently, but yeah,
it is hard. It's kind of a like foreign thing, I think, for people who have had any other sort of pet in their life or animal, like they're like, well, it's a pet, it's for life, but when it's
a little different,
like your competition partner or whatever, sometimes
exactly. So why don't we start off, since we're on the subject, can you tell me a little bit about your work at Dreams on Horseback? And then we can start there, and then maybe we can go into some of your research and just kind of some of your academic career, because I think this article is just, it is on the hippotherapy, but I'd love to understand how that kind of fits in the bigger picture.
Yeah, so I can start by talking about the study that we did at Dreams on Horseback. So it was a randomized controlled trial, but structured to be like a feasibility study. So, we had a smaller sample size than you would normally see in an RCT. Really just trying to, this is kind of a newly established partnership with Dreams on Horseback, like a new venture for everyone. So a lot of the, feasibility aspect was just kind of like, can we do this sort of study, with the resources that we have at this facility, et cetera. So the aim of the study, aside from the feasibility, was to implement an upper extremity targeted intervention for children with cerebral palsy or autism spectrum disorder. We were really hoping to get some kiddos with dual diagnosis. We did get 1 or 2 like unofficially, but mostly we had kids with CP and kids with autism. And so it was a physical therapy intervention using the equine environment and hippotherapy to try to improve function in the upper extremities, so use of the arms and hands. So all of the participants in the study had some sort of motor impairment or motor delay in either fine or gross motor in their upper extremities. So at least one arm had to be affected for them to qualify for the study. And so we had a control group and we had the treatment group. Our control was a waitlist control. So they also received the intervention after they completed their like waiting period. So for the control group, they came into the lab for their kind of like pre-baseline assessment, and then they would complete 4 weeks of just continuing with their regular activities, and then come in for their baseline assessment, and then receive the intervention and then follow up. And then the treatment group just got baseline assessment, intervention, and then follow-up assessment. The intervention was 4 days a week for 4 weeks. So it was, fairly intensive. They came for 1 hour each day. And it was structured so that they spent 30 minutes in the barn doing different sort of activities in the equine environment. So things like feeding horses hay, filling water buckets, sweeping aisles, that sort of stuff. We did some like making treats and like other fun stuff like that. And the hot summer days, we did some baths for horses. So they were, scrubbing the horses. And then the other 30 minutes were on the horse. So we did a lot of upper extremity focused activities, like, we would have lots of games out in the arena. So we're playing throwing and catching games with like balls and bean bags, like doing some reaching with rings to hang them on poles or put them on horses' ears and fun stuff like that. We did also incorporate some aspects of riding skills as it pertained to like use of their upper extremities. So holding the reins was a big one. And like for some of the kiddos, we did like work on using the reins to steer or to halt the horse. We didn't do too much change of positions on the horse, but they would like stand in stirrups or sometimes like sort of prop on their hands while standing in the stirrups. But that was about the extent of like position changes. We did do some changes of gait. So for some of the kiddos, we would do a little bit of trotting, lots of changes of direction, stops and starts, things like that to challenge some of their postural control as well. And then they also, like at the beginning and the end of the session, they would help with grooming and tacking and untacking the horse. So, like you holding and using the different brushes. Some of the kids would help with hoof picking if it was appropriate. And like learning to buckle the girth and do the buckles on the bridle, that kind of stuff. So really any sort of activity that involves the upper extremities that we could do in the equine environment is kind of what they were doing. And we had the kids come like 2 every hour. So they would show up and like both kids would help with grooming and tacking the horse. And then one kid would go off into the arena and the other kid would stay in the barn, and then they would switch at the half hour. And then they would come together to help untack the horse and feed a treat and then head out. So that was the general structure. We had, we would have like one therapist in the barn working with the kiddo that was in the barn, and then one therapist, usually me, that was working with the kids that were mounted on the horse, and then lots of volunteers to assist and keep everyone safe. We had several volunteers from Dreams on Horseback that got involved, and then also like end of August through the end of the study, which was like in November, we had several DPT and OTD students who were volunteering with the study, and they were really, really a great help. Let's see what else. We, for the assessments, they came into our lab at Martha Morehouse, and we were looking at evaluating changes in gross motor and upper extremity function, and also in participation. So in terms of like how much they're participating in daily life activities and like community activities and that sort of thing. So we did the gross motor function measure, which is a pretty standard gross motor measure that's used for kids with cerebral palsy. And then we also did a reaching biomechanics measure that we've used in our lab a few times. So we had the children seated at a table, and they would reach for a bottle, like a juice bottle full of liquid, and pretend to drink from it, so that we could look at kind of the coordination of their arm and hand movement during a functional task. And then we also had 2 parent surveys. One was focused on like participation and adaptive behavior. And then the other, so that was the Vineland measure. And then the other was the participation and environment measure for children and youth, which is a parent survey on child participation. It looks at 3 different environments. So it looks at home, school, and community environments and the child's participation in each of those. And so the parent can rate their participation, and also they can say if they want to see a change in their child's participation, like if they want them to be participating more in that certain activity or be more involved. And then we also did a child interview measure. That's, I always forget what the acronym is. It's called the CAPE PAC. It's the Child Assessment of Participation and Enjoyment. And then the PAC part is preferences of activities for children. So it's like a 2-part survey. So the CAPE part, you go through like all these different activities and ask the child if they do it, how often they do it, who they usually do it with, and like how much they like doing it. Oh, and also where they do it. So if the item is like, do you play cards? Like, are you playing cards at home? Are you playing cards at school? Are you playing cards at a relative's house? That kind of thing. And then the preferences for activities of children goes through all the same activities and just asks the child, if you could do anything in the world, how much would you want to do this activity? And it's like a 3-point scale. So they can say like, no, sort of, or yes, basically. So those were all of the measures that we did in the assessments, which it was a lot. They were usually there for 2 to 3 hours each time. And we repeated those measures for like if they were in the control group, they did them 3 times. So pre-baseline, baseline, and then follow-up. And then in the treatment group, they did them 2 times. And then throughout the actual treatment period, we had some measures that we took for that as well. So we videotaped every single session so that we could measure intervention fidelity. So like making sure that we were consistent with the intervention and actually like meeting the goals that we had set out for the intervention. So like one of the metrics that we're using is making sure that at least 80% of the activities that the children did throughout the session involved their upper extremities, because we really wanted to target the upper extremity. So I have some students who are working on completing that rating right now. They're going through all the videos and coding all of that. We also completed an engagement measure. We did it for like 1 session per week per participant. So they each had hopefully 4 measures. And so one of them was a service provider measure. So as the therapist, we would fill out the measure at the end of the session and just like how engaged we felt the child was during the session. And it looks at like their behavioral involvement, like cognitive involvement, affective involvement, and then just overall engagement. And then there's an observational measure for kind of the same scale where like a third party observer can go through and rate not only the child's engagement, but also the service provider's engagement. So I have some students completing that measure right now as well. And then we also had the children complete a survey on enjoyment. It's called the Enjoy Scale. And it's like a 25 question, like Likert scale that basically rates like overall enjoyment of, and it's made to be applied to any sort of activity. So we had the children complete that once a week as well. And so one of the reasons that we did so many measures for this study is because it's a pilot feasibility study. We really want to see like which measures will be most appropriate to use for a larger scale clinical trial. So it was definitely a lot of measures for the participants to complete. But it was helpful for us to sort of parse out like which ones are going to be good to use going forward and which ones are, maybe not so great, not what we were hoping that they would measure, or not appropriate for the population, which is what we found for several of them. So that was kind of the overall gist of the study. I don't know if you have any questions. I feel like that was a lot.
Yeah. So, well, a couple of things. What was the age range of children?
So we were recruiting anywhere from 6 to 17 years old. The age range that we actually got was 6 to 13.
Okay. So it sounds like you're in the process, since this completed in November, of gathering all the data. So we don't have any like solid assertions that came out of that you can share. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're still working on analyzing the results, but because it's a feasibility study, like the main outcomes that we're focusing on were, like percentage of participants who completed the study, like completed all the treatment hours, completed all the assessments, that kind of thing. How many participants we were able to recruit versus enroll, and like participant retention. And the intervention fidelity is also going to be one of the major questions that we want to answer as well. But because we had a small sample size, we had 11 participants complete the study. We really don't, it's not a large enough sample to make any statement about the effects of the actual intervention. Okay. So, we will look at like trends in the data to see if, individual participants had positive changes pre to post, but we can't make any like,
got it,
real statements about the effectiveness of the intervention at this point. But the goal of this study was to determine if this structure is feasible, that we could recruit more participants to do a larger study that we would actually be able to evaluate the efficacy.
So this is like the feasibility. Is this doable? Let's test all these things. What, what did people respond to? What did they not? Okay. So anecdotally, did you get any feedback, or what can you tell me as far as what you experienced with the children, what their reactions were, what their parents said?
So anecdotally, we got a lot of positive feedback from parents that, their children were doing more at home. So while it wasn't necessarily one of our goals as physical therapists, we did, like, one of our parents of a child with autism was telling us that her daughter was talking a lot more, like in an appropriate way, because she would talk all the time and like sing songs, but very rarely used like intentional speech to communicate. And mom said, I think within the first week that her daughter was using more intentional like verbal communication. Like I know one thing she told us was her daughter went to like hand her a toy or something and said, "Here you go, mommy." So that was one anecdotal thing that we got that, you know, like I said, it obviously as a physical therapy intervention, it wasn't like our intention, but I know that that is often something that I hear anecdotally from both hippotherapy and therapeutic riding, is increased speech. But we got a lot of positive feedback on the like the motor outcomes as well. And actually several of the participants' parents were trying to get them into therapeutic riding lessons at Dreams on Horseback to continue after the study because they were so pleased with how much it was helping their child just with general like strengthening and balance. One of the kiddos was able to get into lessons and he's doing weekly lessons at Dreams on Horseback now. And I substituted his lesson these last 2 weeks because the instructor was out of town, and he is just like leaps and bounds from where he was even at the end of the study. So it was really cool to see that. Just like his posture was like so much better, like sitting much more erect in the saddle. And like he has hemiplegia, so like one side of his body was affected, and we always had a hard time with getting him to use that left hand and like keep holding the reins, and just generally like attending to that side of his body was a challenge. And like these last 2 weeks he's been holding the reins with both hands like no problem, and even like using that hand to steer. So it was really cool to see the progress that he's made since the study. But even during the study, you know, we would see huge differences in being able to like hold the reins and grasp different objects with the affected hand. And also confidence, I felt like we saw a huge change with, because a lot of these kids hadn't been around horses before. So that was like a really scary thing for them on day one. And like, you know, usually by the end of the first week, they would start to get a lot more comfortable and, you know, be a lot more willing to like try new things and a lot more confident around the horses. And I think too, just like the social interaction component of it. So, I mean, one of my main motivators for this study, and like using this approach to physical therapy in general, is that I think there is a lot of value in taking therapy out of the clinic and taking it into this more like community environment. And especially with, you know, hippotherapy, but I think really anytime that you're like in more of an adaptive recreation environment, like there's a lot of people involved. There's always a lot of volunteers that are helping and assisting. And it provides this kind of social and community component to it that I think is really beneficial for the children to feel like they have a community that they're coming to rather than kind of feeling like they're going to a doctor's office.
Right.
So that for me was like a big motivator for wanting to do research in this area, and also a big reason why a lot of our outcome measures were focused on participation. Because I'm very curious about like when we take therapy outside of the clinic, does that break down some of the barriers for these children of like being able to get out in the community and feeling like they can, you know, like do community activities and recreational activities, and feeling more comfortable interacting with new people and all of that kind of stuff. So I I think that that was like a big benefit of this study. I think unfortunately, because of COVID, it was hard for us to really capture any changes in that area because, like a lot of parents, when they were filling out those participation surveys, they're like, well, my kid's in remote school. Well, we're not going out and doing these things because of COVID. Like, oh, they used to do this sport, but we're not doing it now because of COVID. And so I think that unfortunately, even if there would be a change because of their participation in the hippotherapy, we weren't seeing it because COVID was preventing them from doing that anyway.
Got it.
So that was a little bit of a bummer for me. It's like,
Right.
oh, but also, something to keep in mind that like maybe we should measure this again in the future when people are a little more back to doing their regular activities. But yeah, any other questions?
Yeah. Well, I just was thinking too, I mean, being a horse person and my daughter has special needs and I see what it does. But I mean, even what you were describing about, you get immediate feedback on a horse. And I wonder, like, has that ever been measured in this space of like how effective it is? Because like you said, you're steering, you're stopping. And I would just think that that's like a big part of how this works and why it works so well.
Yeah, I think, it really, the amount that we incorporate those like riding skills really varies from one participant to the next, depending on just where they're at and what their needs are for therapy and goals. Because we're really not there to teach horseback riding. We're there to do therapy, and everything that we do needs to be focused on trying to improve their physical function. So I am a horse person too. I love riding horses. I want to share that love with all these kids, and I want to teach them these skills because I think that does open a lot of doors for them in terms of opportunities for recreational activity and things like that in the future. But also as a physical therapist, I need to operate within my scope of practice. So for some of the kids, like I said, I would do that if it was, functional and appropriate for them. It's a good upper extremity challenge to be steering and like having to isolate one arm versus the other for steering and that kind of thing. But I do think that it's motivating for them. And so for the participants that it was appropriate, I absolutely incorporated that into their sessions because they're going to want to do the activity more if there's a purpose to it than if I'm just saying, okay, we're going to do 5 repetitions of externally rotating your shoulder,
Right.
that doesn't matter to an 8-year-old. So yeah, I think there is a huge motivating factor there. And it's also really confidence building too. Wow, I'm controlling a horse, So I definitely agree with that. I think for some of them, just being in the presence of the horse is enough. But for some of our participants that were a little older and had a really high cognitive level, I mean, they wanted to ride a horse. They didn't just want to do PT. So, but there is that, challenge for me of I need to make this appropriate for therapy and not a riding lesson. So, we would incorporate that into it when it was appropriate. And I do think it was very motivating for them. And same with a lot of the activities we did off the horses. I, to be honest, after the study, almost find more value in those activities than I do with the mounted activities. There's just so much opportunity there in terms of for physical therapy and occupational therapy, the things that we can do just in the equine environment the grooming, the feeding, the sweeping. Like there's some really good, I know OT loves like the heavy work activities.
Yep.
So like carrying the, buckets of water, pushing the wheelbarrow, that kind of stuff. But there's just like so many opportunities to use the upper extremities and really the whole body when you're looking at, those different like barn chores and things like that. And I think it's really rewarding for the kids to feel like there is a purpose to what they're doing. They're not just lifting weights, like they're feeding horses and there's a horse standing there like nickering at them, so excited that they're bringing hay to its stall. So yeah, I think that that aspect of it is hugely important, and that was one of the reasons that we incorporated those engagement and enjoyment measures too, because I really think that there is a big motivational component to interacting with the animals and feeling like there's a purpose to what they're doing. So I wanted to try to capture that with the engagement measures and the enjoyment measure as well, to kind of see if my hypothesis was right there.
Right.
But ultimately, to really answer that question, I need to compare it to like other therapy in other environments in the future. So, all we can really say from what we've measured right now is that the kids were demonstrating high engagement a majority of the time. But that's not to say that it's any
more
different than when they're in the clinical environment, because I don't know that yet.
Got it. Do you have photos, or do you think Dreams on Horseback would be willing to share photos?
I have some photos that Dreams on Horseback took for an article that they were putting in their newsletter. I can share them with you. I don't really love them just because they really wanted to like stage me in front of what was happening. So in the photos, like I'm kind of standing there looking at the camera, and there are other people doing hippotherapy behind me.
Oh, okay.
Which is okay, but in reality, like I was the one that was doing the therapy. I wasn't just standing there supervising. So I kind of just feel like it doesn't really represent what was truly happening. But I think that I know that I snapped some photos a couple times, which again wouldn't have me in them, but we also could pull screenshots from the videos, but I don't know how good they would be.
Well, the other thing is we have a photographer. Will you be back out there? Is this something we could schedule and get some good shots, or what's the feasibility of that?
We could probably stage something. I'm not doing hippotherapy out there right now. I do occasionally. I'm also a certified therapeutic riding instructor, so I do like substitute lessons for them occasionally. But there is, that one kiddo that I mentioned who was in the study, he rides regularly on Tuesday nights now.
Okay.
And because his family has signed a media release with us already, like we could probably see if we could kind of jump in on a Tuesday night when he's there. If you don't mind, maybe share what you have, and then we can just at least see what we're working with, and then make a determine like, we really need to get, because also when is this article supposed to be published? It's due the first week of April. Okay. Because they do it as a print that they, print actual like magazine that they send, and then they also do a digital version. Okay. So we have a little bit of time. It's not like tomorrow. But that gives us a little over a month, to maybe make something happen. Yeah. Well, I can send you the photos that Dreams on Horseback took, and then whatever other photos I have. And then we can kind of go from there. I know, like, I don't think that there's any photos in there with me actually like working with the kiddos, but I mean, depending on what you want to, I don't know.
Well, I think this is kind of a profile in you. So the other questions I have is, being, I think, like why horses, why hippotherapy to do this study. And I guess I think I know the answer because you also are certified, so you're a rider, you're doing equine therapy but if you could speak to that, and then I want to ask you specifically about the award that you received and kind of get a bigger picture of your work and kind of where you are in your academic journey. I think this is going to be your dissertation.
So in terms of like why hippotherapy, so yeah, I'm a horse person. I've been riding my whole life. I got involved with therapeutic riding in high school. For our like senior projects, we had to volunteer somewhere and then like give a presentation on it. And there was a therapeutic riding center in my town that was actually affiliated with a physical therapy clinic. Okay. So they didn't do hippotherapy there, but their lead riding instructor was a physical therapist. Cool. She just like didn't want to jump through all the hoops to be able to call what she was doing hippotherapy, but she was incorporating a lot of hippotherapy into the therapeutic lessons. And so I volunteered with them. I learned a lot from her. That was really like the reason that I ever thought about pursuing physical therapy, because I wanted to do what she was doing. Okay. So that was kind of how it started. I kept volunteering with them like all through college. And I, during college, I kind of drifted away from physical therapy for a while. I still had completed all my prerequisites, but I wasn't sure if that was still what I wanted to do. I got really involved with research in the neuroscience department, and I was doing a lot of research in visual perception. And I went off after college. I had a Fulbright grant, and I continued with that research for a year, and then ultimately decided that I wanted to work in a field where I had a little bit more human interaction and a little less time staring at a computer screen by myself. So that kind of brought me back to physical therapy, but I also really wanted to keep doing research. And so that's when I started looking at dual degree programs, and I don't really know how I came about it, but I think because like hippotherapy and the therapeutic riding was what triggered my interest in physical therapy, I really wanted to focus my research there too. And I knew that there was a need for it, that it was a pretty under-researched intervention. And so when I was looking at schools, I already was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to research. And Dr. Heathcock was the only person that didn't tell me no. So everyone else was like, no, we don't have funding for that. We don't have a facility. Like, no. And I came here to meet with Jill, and she was like, that sounds cool. I used to ride horses when I was a kid. Like, yeah, we could probably figure something out. So I was like, okay, this is
very cool.
And yeah, I don't know. I kind of just have like stuck with that since then, and obviously learned a lot through PT school and like beginning the PhD program. And Jill's big push was always like, you can do this, but it needs to be scientifically rigorous, and like you have to make it dissertation worthy. And so we've put a lot of time and thought into exactly how it was going to be structured. But yeah, I think it was really just my main motivator. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and kind of was like, this is where I want to do my research. And when I moved here for PT school back in 2015, I already was like looking for facilities, like where can I do hippotherapy, around Central Ohio, looking to establish a relationship. And there's actually like no hippotherapy around here at all.
Okay.
Which I didn't know when I got here, but I figured it out pretty quickly. The closest facility that does like actual hippotherapy is like 2 hours away.
Oh, okay.
There's a place in Cincinnati, and there's a place like up near Toledo, but nowhere very close. And so I was like, okay, well, I can start with like a PATH, therapeutic riding center, and see if they're open to, trying new things. So I found Dreams on Horseback. I started volunteering there, and I reached out to their executive director, I think within like a few months of volunteering there, and was like, I'm really curious if you've ever thought about doing hippotherapy here, if it's something that you're open to. And like, would you ever be interested in collaborating on a research project and stuff like that? And she was like super excited about it and was like, these are all things that we thought about and just haven't had a person to bring it here. So
Awesome.
yeah, so I kind of opened that door many years ago, and it's been an ongoing conversation with them. And then we were fortunate enough to get the grant from it's a really long one, American Academy of Cerebral Palsy and Developmental Medicine, and the Pedal with Pete Foundation. They like came together
to get those. I'm going to write those down because I don't.
Yeah, I can type it in the chat too if that's easier.
That would be easier. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so it's. Yeah, so the Pedal with Pete Foundation, I believe, is actually based in Columbus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's all focused on like cerebral palsy research. And then they do like a bike race or something to raise money, I think. And then there's the AACPDM is a like international organization that's focused on just all types of medicine related to CP and other like neurodevelopmental disorders. But so Jill is the PI on that grant. As a PhD student, I'm not allowed to be PI on like research grants.
Okay.
So she's PI and I'm co-I on that grant. And that's the grant that actually funded like the research. And then I also have the grant that I received that are like fellowships to support my effort as a PhD student.
Okay.
With this study as like, the research that I proposed for the grant. Okay. So they all kind of made it possible, but this one in particular funded the actual research of like being able to pay for the horse hours and the facility use and like the participant honorariums, all that kind of stuff.
Got it. Okay. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then
so where are you in the process? So you're working on your dissertation. You will work on your dissertation based on your results, your outcomes.
Yeah. So this study is probably like half of my dissertation. The other half is data that we collected in children with typical development, doing that biomechanics reaching measure that I told you about with the like reaching for the cup to take a drink. So that's kind of the first half of my dissertation, and this is the second half. And we did use that measure with these participants as well to have kind of that continuity there too. And the goal also being that we could compare the results from like the population of kids with CP and autism to the results from the kids with typical development on that reaching measure.
Okay.
So yeah, right now I am writing my dissertation. My tentative defense date is June 15th. So yeah, so we wrapped up like all of the data collection for this study like mid-November, like right before Thanksgiving, I would say we finished up. And I'm just like finishing up data analysis now, like the next few weeks, and then writing. Well, I'm already writing now too, but yeah, but I think so. I'm also staying on at OSU for a postdoc. That is part of one of the awards that I guess kind of got for this study. So I'll be starting that fall semester, and I know we are trying to see if we can do more, like another round of this study, basically as part of my postdoc. We're still trying to kind of sort out the details and logistics of that. But I mean, I think, I don't know if you want me to speak to kind of like the, you know, my future goals or what.
Yeah, I kind of want to know, you know, I understand now the reason for the horse involvement, but I kind of would like to know just too what you're hoping to accomplish and how you want to help kind of globally this population.
Yeah. So I think, you know, like I said, like what led me to this was, you know, I'm a horse person and I really enjoy sharing that passion with others. And I really liked being involved with the therapeutic riding, and, you know, hippotherapy was kind of like a natural extension of that for me. So that's sort of what brought me here. But since I've gotten to this place, I think my broader sort of vision for my research is that I'm really interested in researching and developing therapy interventions for children with not just cerebral palsy, but any type of motor disability, to develop interventions that are more like community-based and more engaging for these children, and really trying to find ways that we can use therapy to get this population more involved in like community recreation. So I know that horses aren't for everyone. I'm really interested in looking at ways that we can sort of leverage other adaptive recreation to be used for therapy interventions. I think, so my motivation for this is kind of twofold. So one, I think that it's more engaging for the children to do therapy in that type of environment and doing something that, you know, like has a purpose. But also I think that there is a huge benefit to using therapy to introduce these kids to a physical activity that they could continue to do for their entire life. You know, we know that like sedentary lifestyle and just lack of physical activity is a big problem in population of people with motor disabilities. And I think, you know, a big barrier is they need adaptations to be able to participate in these activities, and they need somebody who has the expertise to like determine what those adaptations are and what equipment they need and teach them how to do it, right? But I think if we can use these activities for therapy and also be teaching them the skills to do it, then they could probably continue on with like an adaptive recreation program, or potentially even on their own after they've kind of completed their, stint of therapy. So I think that's kind of a long-term lofty goal of mine, perhaps, but I really think that there are ways to take these types of therapy interventions and make them more community-based, which could increase access and also, hopefully increase general physical activity in this population in the long term.
Right. Oh, that's really powerful. I have a quick question. This is kind of self-motivated because my daughter, I've told you about it, the horse daughter is doing equine science at the Delaware Career Center.
Okay.
How do you get certified to be a therapeutic riding instructor?
So it's through the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship.
Okay.
PATH is the acronym. And it's a bit of a lengthy process, I will say. Like, you have to first complete, you have to demonstrate that you have sufficient horse knowledge and riding skills. And then you complete a minimum of 25 hours of supervised instruction with a PATH certified therapeutic riding instructor. And then you, to do the test, you have to like submit a video of you teaching a therapeutic riding lesson. And it has to meet all of their many criteria for therapeutic riding lessons. And then you have to do like a proctored online exam to actually get your certification as well. So it took me probably about a year to do it all. And that was like without, I already had the horse knowledge. I already had the riding skills. And the other one is like knowledge of disabilities, which I already had from, being a physical therapist.
Right.
But so I think it depends on the person and like what you already have in terms of like experience in those arenas. But I probably could have done it in less than a year. Some of it was just like COVID and not being able to attend one of the like certification events. I tried to do one in November of 2020, and then the university told me I wasn't allowed to travel for it, so I couldn't go.
Right.
So that I would have been done in 6 months if I had done that one and passed, but I had to kind of drag it out a little bit and do it the like virtual way with the video and stuff, which is now, that's the only way they do it now. They've kind of like transitioned to a new type of certification process. But anyway.
I thank you for sharing all the information, because she doesn't really want to be a trainer, but she has lived experience from all this therapy and all these diagnoses. And so I was thinking like that would be a little niche, and it's part of her high school program. She could work towards that, because like next year she gets to do like an apprenticeship or an internship. And so I'm thinking the light bulbs are going off for Dreams on Horseback.
Yeah, I think one of the riders that I sometimes teach on Tuesdays actually does that Delaware program too.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Her name's Azalea.
Okay.
Your daughter knows her.
Oh,
but
nice.
I know she does something with horses in Delaware for school.
Okay. That is so cool. And what was her name? Azalea?
Azalea. Yeah,
Okay.
she rides at Dreams on Horseback. She's been riding there for
Cool.
I don't know, a very long time, longer than I've been there. So,
Wow.
8+ years.
That's amazing. And where'd you do your undergrad?
Skidmore College.
Okay. Very cool.
Saratoga Springs.
Nice. So where are you from? You're from New York?
I'm from Connecticut.
Connecticut. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, thank you. You've given me a full hour of your time and plenty, I think, to work with. I may take a little liberty in like the opening for this and kind of describe what you were saying about, 2 kids come, one's doing the riding, just to kind of make this interesting. So anything I do, of course, I'll run by you.
Okay.
For your approval and input.
Awesome.
because I just think this lends itself to like a lot of great visuals with the story. So to kind of make it interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
And
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It was really
yeah,
great chatting with you.
yeah, it was great chatting with you. And this, like I said, this will be good for you too, is like for funding and showing your reach and outreach. This could be
Yeah,
this could be a good thing
absolutely.
for you
I'm
too.
excited.
So yeah, if you don't mind just sharing some photos, however you want to do that, if you want to throw them in box, if you want to, whatever, and I can take a look at those, and then I'll follow up with you about if we need to do some more.
Awesome. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you for sharing all this. And gosh, I'm just so impressed and proud with the work you're doing, and personally, as well as, in the job role, but just personally, it's so important.
Yeah, thank you. I love doing it. I'm just like, it's fun. So
That's awesome.
I'm glad that I can help people in the process.
Absolutely. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day, and I'll start working on this, and I'll be in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. Take care, Julia.
Bye.
Bye.